Huzzah, everybody! I am KenMeisterLP, and welcome back to the Metroid retrospective here with Metroid 2: Return of Samus for the Game Boy. I quite like this game. I quite like this game a lot indeed. Even more so than the original, which isn't hard for me to, really do if I'm going to be straight up honest here. Metroid 2 is, as you can no doubt tell, the sequel to the original Metroid, with quite a few gameplay enhancements and changes that overall make the experience a bit more comfortable, fleshed out, and it just makes the game a lot more fun in my eyes. So, with that being said, let's talk about the general gameplay changes and improvements that I had just mentioned like less than 5 seconds ago. Well, first off, we already start off with the long beam. We have 30 missiles in our repertoire, and we can go into Morph Ball right off the bat. We can also shoot downwards, and we can shoot down from a crouching position, which makes shooting enemies in this game a lot more comfortable because I hated having to go into Morph Ball in the original just to beat smaller enemies, which was like 90% of the enemy roster in the original. So, yeah, thankfully that's resolved. The structure of this game is a bit different from the original Metroid. As you can see in the bottom right there, we have a Metroid counter, which signifies all of the Metroids we have to exterminate on this planet. As you can no doubt tell from that statement, the plot of this game goes as follows. Galactic Federation has unanimously decided that, you know what, we're kind of fed up with these Metroids being the guinea pigs for all of these space pirate experiments. So, Samus, we want you to go down to the space pirate world, not space pirate, but the Metroid homeworld of SR388 and commit mass genocide. Woo! Sounds like quite a fun expedition. So, that being said, the way you progress through this game is you go through these streamlined areas with just enough open accessibility to where you still need to kind of like explore every nook and cranny before you can find what you need. And you have to exterminate every Metroid within a certain area. So, for example, we're in the first area of the game and we have one Metroid to go out and find and exterminate. And upon doing so, we gain access to the next area and so on and so forth. And it's going to be kind of a continuing trend throughout this entire game. And some people may or may not like that. I don't mind it per se because the game still gives you plenty of options to like go out and explore different areas within whatever confined space you're going to next. So it never feels too limited as to where you need to go. So with that being said, let's fight our first Metroid. Unlike in Metroid 1 and most other Metroid games for that matter, Metroids come in different shapes and sizes. That right there was an Alpha Metroid. The Alpha Metroid is the first evolutionary form of the Metroid itself, and we're going to be running into different forms of Metroids throughout our galactic adventure. With those being the Alpha Metroid, the Gamma Metroid, the Zeta Metroid, and the Omega Metroid. With it all coming down to the Queen Metroid, which we need to exterminate to keep this planet from spawning any more Metroids. And again, I really enjoy this game, man. It's like... again, it's just not one of my favorites. But, like, it's because of this game that, you know, it's really sparked interest for Nintendo to, like, go out of their way and make another, like, 2D Metroid game, finally. And it's also kind of sparked, you know, the controversies surrounding AM2R and Metroid, you know, as a whole between, you know, AM2R and Nintendo. And it's kind of funny to think about that, really, because it all kind of started from this really obscure game that most people haven't really played. But before we go on, I want to talk about the save stations. We now have the ability to save! Woo! So that means you go on this thing, you press start, and whenever you die or start up the game again, you start from this very location. Thank freaking god, it only took us like 2 games to like get down to this point of where we didn't need to like go and kill ourselves before starting a new game, or creating a checkpoint for ourselves to like start over again from where we last left off. So yeah, this game really does its best to go out of its way and make the experience a lot more comfortable, I feel. But yeah, going back to AM2R, man, it's crazy to think that a lot of like these like fan reimaginings and remakes, and just the fact that we're getting another 2D Metroid game after 13 years happened because this game just happened to exist, you know? A game that not too many people think fondly of. And don't worry, I'm going to be giving this game quite a bit of love. I think this game definitely has elements of good game design here and there that I'm going to be pointing out a bit later. But of course, it also has its flaws and reasons why not too many people go back to this game or think too fondly of it. If, again, mostly because of its age. So, with that being said, we're going into Phase 2, and why I'm describing it as Phase 2, before I really started, truly investing myself into memorizing this game's layout, because unlike Metroid 1, we're not going into this game with a guide and interrupting the pace of this playthrough every 5 minutes, so thank God for that, and that can basically apply to every other Metroid game I'm going to be tackling as well. And Nintendo Power, I collect a lot of older Nintendo Power magazines, as well as some of the current ones. Well, current, relatively speaking. Nintendo Power doesn't really exist anymore. They had an article on Metroid 2 where they gave out the layout of the different areas and maps and just general tips and tricks here and there. And what they would do is that depending on which area you go into and find a set amount of Metroids before moving on to another, they would call these areas phases. So the phase we're in currently is phase 2, but once we get all of the Metroids here exterminated, we'll be moving into phase 3, a different area overall, and so on and so forth. And that's the general gist of how progression in this game works. That being said, though, we're not just going to be exterminating Metroids. Much like Metroid 1, there's still upgrades aplenty to find, if not more so than Metroid 1. There's quite a few new goodies to find here that were more or less introduced in this particular game, but we'll be getting to those once we find those set upgrades. So the first thing I'm going to go after is the Morph Ball Bomb. As usual, each time you run into a hatch, shoot it down with 5 missiles, and you'll be free to press onwards. That being said, though, you don't really see any other hatches besides those, so the moment you see a hatch, just, create the natural instinct to shoot it with 5 missiles before progressing onwards, I guess. But the Morph Ball Bomb, it's more or less not any different from the original Metroid game, other than the fact that you actually have to press down twice to go into Morph Ball as opposed to once. And I think the Morph Ball Bomb itself is a little bit faster than it was in Metroid 1, so maybe that's something I didn't really care to pay much attention to, I suppose. But much like any other Metroid game before and after this one, there's of course expansions to find. You have your missile expansions, you have your energy tanks, and that's really about it, honestly. But unlike most other Metroid games where you grab a missile expansion and you get 5 missiles off of it, in this game you get 10 missiles off of a missile expansion. And what makes expansion collection a lot less annoying in this game as opposed to, the previous game, and hell, even most other Metroid games, is that you have 4 less expansions to collect because of this fact. And also, they have this tendency to put expansions in rooms where you find like 2 or 3 of them at once. So you're never really going to be running low on missiles in this entirety of the game unless like you're really careless with missiles exterminating Metroid. So Nintendo definitely did a pretty good job in taking into account how many missiles you really needed for this adventure, because without missiles you can't really do anything to Metroids in this game, and you'll be in big doo-doo-doo. Doo-doo-doo. You'll be in big doo-doo if you don't have any missiles in your repertoire to wipe out these Metroids. So yeah. Not gonna lie though, I went through numerous outtakes just trying to get this first video recorded, and I'm just now getting past the 10-minute mark without any need to like redo entire segments. I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to these kind of playthroughs, just to make sure I put the love and care into these games, playing them as much as I do commentating them. Didn't really care too much for Metroid 1, which was why that LP was kind of rushed out the door somewhere, because, again, I don't really care for Metroid 1. But for the games I do enjoy, I want to put into those said games the love and care that I have for those games growing up playing them, as I would play them on YouTube for you guys, you know? Think of it as a love project. But anywho, the upgrade we recently got is the Ice Missile. Or the, not the Ice Missile, the Ice Beam. The Ice Beam allows you to freeze enemies much like Metroid 1. Except in this game, once you freeze an enemy, it stays frozen no matter how many times you shoot it. And this is how I prefer my Ice Beam to work, goddammit. And apparently Nintendo realized this and decided to take this into account for every other Metroid game following after this particular title. So yeah, good on Nintendo to find out what worked and what didn't in this game. It feels almost like an experiment with this game, so to say. In fact, you could probably call this one game in particular a gigantic experiment for Nintendo to find out what new additions worked and what didn't. And unfortunately, that could be kind of applied to the thing we just got, which is the Spider Ball, because for whatever reason, you don't really see the Spider Ball in every other 2D game after this, though that's not counting the remake we're about to get. I did see footage of the Spider Ball in Samus Returns, but, you know, past that, past Super Metroid, Zero Mission, and Fusion, you never really saw the Spider Ball again, except for, like, the Prime games where it was limited to being used on these magnetic rails, so you couldn't really use it on any surface like you could in this game. And you know what? I can see that as being understandable, seeing as we also get the space jump in this game, and it kind of makes the Spider Ball seem a bit redundant? Yeah. But unlike Metroid 1, we will definitely be going for 100%. All the missile expansions you get in this game are indeed the ones that you'll be getting for maximum completion. So you don't have to worry about it capping out to a certain number and then you continue getting missiles without any need to like go beyond the maximum count you have currently, much like in Metroid 1, where that game had like 8 energy tanks for some reason, but you only needed like 6. Well, that's not entirely true. There's actually 6 energy tanks in this game, but you can only have up to like 5 of them, unlike Metroid 1. But that concept isn't really applied to the missiles, so to say. So we more or less got all of the upgrades we needed within Phase 2. So with that being said and done, we're going to head into the depths of Phase 2 and wipe out the rest of the Metroids we missed, now that we have the upgrades we need. And I think that'll about do it for this particular part in the playthrough. I'm using the word particular a lot for whatever reason. But next time on Let's Play Metroid 2 Return of Samus for the Super Game Boy, um, we're going to be wrapping up Phase 2 and moving on into Phase 3. So thank you guys for watching and see you guys then.